Ilford's Delta 3200 is a 1000 ISO film designed with pushing in mind. The film has a very wide exposure latitude, it's ideal for low light situations, and it has a very unobtrusive grain. Knowing that the film is a 1000 ISO film, I rated it at 1600 because I knew anything past that would probably be too underexposed, and there was only one dilution for X-Tol, which was the stock dilution, so that's the one I went with. In this video, we'll be looking at 3 characteristics for the film: shadow detail, grain, and sharpness. This will vary, of course, depending on what you rate your film at, but this will give you a little idea of the starting point of what you can expect with this film. Starting with the shadow detail, I metered for a zone 3 on the tires, and being that the film is about 1 stop underexposed, that would land the shadow detail somewhere in between zone 2 and zone 3. Taking a closer look, that looks to be just about on point, as there is just a hint of tread detail in the tires, and you can still make out what's there, but it is getting pretty dark. Here's another similar shot, and this film has enough latitude to give you the ability to shoot at reasonable shutter speeds and still capture all the shadow detail that you need. The tires are, again, a little dark here, but you can still see all the detail that you need. You can see the tread in the tire, and honestly that's probably about where I would bring those shadows down to anyway in post-processing, so it works out. The film will give you some leverage in darker situations, but it can't see into the dark, so if there isn't adequate lighting, it's going to fall a little bit flat, and you can see that here. Moving on to the grain, I initially avoided this film because I had heard that the grain makes it look like you shot your photos in the middle of a sandstorm, and I'm pleased to find that the grain is actually pretty fine and overall pretty tame on this film. In the highlights of the film, it describes the grain as unobtrusive, and I would have to 100% agree with that. The grain is not an issue at all in this film and doesn't get in the way whatsoever, so I'm really a huge fan of the grain for this high-speed film. Lastly, moving on to the sharpness, I would say the film has a bit of a softness to it, and it looks like it's because of the high speed and high amount of grain in the film, but I don't think it deters from the overall look of it. I still think there's plenty of detail and the sharpness looks fine, but it is noticeably a little bit softer than other films. Here's another shot with text so that you can get a feel for the sharpness and also the overall level of grain in the film. Another separate quality that I noticed in this film and also wasn't expecting was halation. Halation, if you're not familiar with it, is when strong light sources get that glowing effect surrounding them, and this is usually common in cinestill films. T-green films tend to be more sensitive in the highlights, and that combined with the higher sensitivity of this film, I think is what's causing this halo effect. And normally I don't really like halation, but in this film it was kind of a nice surprise. You can see some of that halation here in the light reflecting off the car, and I think it adds a nice little flare to the image. Overall, I'm very happy with this film. I think the fact that it's available in 120 is a definite plus. Kodak's P3200 is only available in 35mm, so I think that would give Ilford the edge over the competition. The larger film size of 120 is what's going to help mitigate a lot of that grain, so its availability in 120 is a huge advantage. This film is a huge benefit for low light situations, although I probably wouldn't shoot it anywhere past 1600 because I think the shadow detail would just be too low. I would definitely shoot this film again, and I would highly recommend giving it a try. Have you guys ever shot Delta 3200 before? Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time on The Negative.